The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leagues Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and it is the interview-based podcast time, and it is Thursday, so that means a interview with a former player or a fan of rugby league comes out, and this time it is a fan of rugby league, a massive fan of rugby league, and he has a really interesting story because he grew up supporting the St George Dragons and obviously still supports the St George Illawarra Dragons, but has a massive interest in the Adelaide Rams, a former team in the NRL. Based out of Adelaide, obviously, and only had the 2 seasons in the competition. They came in around the Super League time, and they played in the Super League and also the year after. But he has a massive collection of Super League jerseys, or Adelaide Rams jerseys, and merchandise as well. But so the story I have with his name is Guy Wilson, and the story, the chat that I have with him, we talk about his support for the Dragons growing up and famous favourite moments, players, etc. But we really dive into the Adelaide Rams, and it is a really interesting chat because we talk about how he developed a support for them and just his collection of memorabilia, I guess you could say. But we also talk about how with the NRL potentially expanding into 18, 19, maybe 20 teams, why Adelaide should be a good team to come back into the NRL. So at one point during the chat, he's got some really good stats about why Adelaide should be picked over maybe Perth and another Brisbane side, even another international side or a PNG side. So I really found that interesting. But it was a great chat with Guy. I really appreciate his time and the chat as well. You can find his page on Instagram. It's called Adelaide Ram page, and there's all different photos from games on there. Some of his Adelaide Rams collection. So he is a lover of sport and a lover of rugby league, and he wants to make the NRL national again. So enjoy this chat with Guy, and I think you will, because it is a bit of a unique chat. I probably could have chatted longer, but I really appreciate Guy for his chat. I just really enjoyed the chat, so you guys will too. Look, quickly, this would not be at all possible without the sponsors of the podcast. Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leagues Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Teamwear, the Parramatta Times, the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast. Look, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Or actually, I stuffed that up, didn't I? Look, as Hindy says,
get a beer, coffee, whatever you want.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and let's get straight into it. And today on the Paracave Podcast, we're going back to the Fans and Members series, where I interview fans of rugby league teams, not necessarily always Parramatta fans, but fans across the NRL, across the league, because it's great to hear stories about passionate fans and their support of their rugby league team, and it brings back great memories for them and also for myself. Now today we've got a fan who's got a little bit in every sort of little bit of a camp. Growing up is a lifelong Dragons fan, but is also, as you can see on the visuals, a Adelaide Rams fan, and also supported a second sort of team, the Parramatta Eels as well. But welcome to the Paracave podcast, Mr. Guy Wilson.
Oh, thanks, Troy. Thanks for having me along, mate. And been again engaging on Twitter for quite some time. It's great to meet you, and look forward to giving you some insight, your fans' insight of whatever you want to know.
No worries. Well, let's get straight into it. Well, born and bred in Sydney. First of all, how did you find rugby league, and what would be your earliest rugby league memory?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the southern parts of a suburb called Bonnet Bay, down in the Sutherland Shire. My family were actually big into motorsport, so they weren't football fans, but I had neighbours at the end of my street of three generations, kids who were a bit older than me, the parents and the grandparents, and they were mad football fans, split down the middle of South Sydney and St George. My first jersey was a South Sydney jersey got given to me, but I gravitated towards the Dragons for two reasons. One was the mother, or my Auntie Agnes, not by relation, but that's what you called adults when you were kids, respectfully. She was what I would call a rabid Dragons fan, and on Sunday afternoons when we were playing in the street, you could just hear her little wireless going in the kitchen and she'd be frothing and yelling and screaming at the Dragons, and so I sort of gravitated towards them. And then she took me to my very first game of rugby league at Clogger Oval. Went along, we watched the North Sydney Bears play the Dragons, and it was the first time I'd been to a sporting event. I might have been about 7 or 8, and I got struck by the colour, the flags, and the action, of course, on the field, but the noise and the emotions that people had. I look on that not as a 7-year-old, but a 50-year-old looking back on my childhood, and that's where I really got my love of the sport as a whole, but also the Dragons. Just that it sort of brought out all these emotions in people, whatever age or description, going with the game. The Dragons won. I don't remember the score, but that was my love of the Dragons, and the love of rugby league was cemented at that game.
Nice one. So who were your favourite Dragons players growing up, watching play?
Yeah, sure. So Craig Young. Primarily. I did get to meet Craig Young. He was a copper, people might know, and my father knew a lot of coppers in the local area, and we ended up at his house. So I didn't know we were going there. Dad said, I'll go and meet some mates after work. I was picked up after school, and I was wearing some Canterbury Bulldog socks, because I used to wear clothes of all descriptions, even though I was a Dragons fan. I go along, and there's my hero, Craig Young, and I'm wearing Canterbury Bulldog socks, and I was so embarrassed. But he was primarily one. Guys like Tony Trudgett, Rod Reddy, Graham Wynn, Brian Johnston, the two, Johnston and Johnson. They were my Dragons heroes as kids. But as we described before we jumped on air here, Troy, is that during that time, Parramatta were going through their hot streak, and they were the ones primarily on TV and winning everything. I was a bit too young to remember the 79 grand final, but, 80s, of course, Para fan being, you know all about that. But my heroes were like your Sterlings, like your Ray Prices, Eric Groth, Steve Ellis. So the players that Parramatta fans hold dear to their hearts from that era, I hold dear to my heart because they form my love of rugby league, even though I was a Dragons fan.
Okay, interesting. The Dragons have a couple of immortals in the game. There's always a big immortal debate going on. What are your thoughts about Brett Kenny, Peter Sterling, Ray Price, Mick Cronin becoming an immortal of rugby league?
Yeah, sure. All great players, and there's all good cases here. I go back a step, Troy, in my belief set. It's just my opinion. It's just an opinion. Is that Immortals is the elitist of the elite, and it is a very unique and small club of the people who were just the ultimate of players. And I look at those players there that you've mentioned, who are all fantastic, great players, make no mistake. But you couldn't have all of them. And if you had one of them, you'd have to have all in a way.
Okay,
That's sort of a thought process in my mind. So of those players, though, that you've mentioned, I'd say the one, I mean, Brett Kenny, I think, was a outstanding player. Peter Stelling, outstanding. But the one player in that who I think would stand out of all would be Ray Price.
Yep.
Ray Price, as a kid growing up, he was perpetual motion, relentless. He left nothing on the field, exhausted, tired. I actually got one of my best mates who I used to play cricket with, played rugby league with him over in Wakefield.
Okay.
When he moved over to Wakefield. And he was telling me stories about how, well, the English League back then in the 80s, it was very amateur. Ray Price come along and taught them what good looked like. And he told me some stories. I could regale you if you want, but one in particular, it goes on for a while. But he was the one guy who just drove the team and drove his teammates to the point of exhaustion to win games, whatever it takes. So I would say that of all those players, Ray Price would be my pick.
Well, you can relay that story if you want. I'm happy to have a listen. I'm sure the listeners will be as well. I mean, absolute legend of rugby league, Ray Price.
Oh, yeah. So my mate Simon used to play lower grades for the Tigers and the Jets, and he got an opportunity to go play over in Wakefield at the same time that Ray Price was there. And the main story he told me, and it was hairs on the back of my neck, is that they were doing training drills. You're talking, English, up north, winter, mud, slush, that kind of environment. Again, where the players weren't as professional, near as professional as they are these days. And you do training, and the guys are basically part-timers. They'd be working through the day and then training after work. And again, one training session, they're doing their training drills. Ray Price is leading the way, come on, and the guys are starting to fall off. They're getting to the point of exhaustion. And then they had to do laps around the oval, just till you dropped.
Yeah.
And Ray Price, who is a forward, led the way and was out and out, home and hosed first after getting across the line. How many laps it was, I can't remember. And there were guys who dropped, and he was going back to these teammates and picking them up and, helping them across the line. Some of them fireman's carry, getting him across the line, because in his mindset, it's not about me finishing, it's about the team finishing.
Okay,
and he did what it took to get his teammates across the line. And I heard that story, and I'm telling it now. I got the hairs on the back of my neck. Just that was the kind of guy that he was. It wasn't about himself; it was about the team. And while I'm no expert in Parramatta beyond '86, the troubles that they've had, is that it's sort of no coincidence to me that when he retired, a lot of that went out of Parramatta. And they won 4 comps with him. So, I mean, that is a guy that just put everything into his sport, into his team, into his club and his teammates. And, it's always stuck with me, that story.
Yeah, well, amazing story. I'm glad you relayed that one for sure. And look, Peter Sterling, I think, has said in the past that he would do anything for Ray Price. I think Pricey's actually said the story on the podcast about back in the day, a few of the players were thinking about leaving Parramatta and going to Manly, and he actually convinced them to stay at Parramatta for less money. It was quite actually a little funny story where he said, "I'm going to bash the crap out of you when I play you," which was probably definitely true. But it just shows you how much of an influence and a player he was at that club for them to stay for less money, when at the time money wasn't as big as it is now, obviously, and people were trying to make a living because they had to work and play rugby league at the same time. So definitely a legend of the club at Parramatta, Ray Price, and fair argument for him to become a rugby league immortal. What about more recent times in Dragons players? Who have been your favourite Dragons players of more recent times?
Yeah, sure. My favourite of all time is Nathan Blacklock.
Okay, yeah.
Nathan Blacklock for me, not so recent, I suppose, if you consider what he retired early 2000s or whenever it was. My favourite, if you're talking more recent times over the last 4 years, it's Mother Hubbard's cupboard that's pretty rare for the Dragons. Ben Hunt has been an absolute Trojan. in a club that has failed for a number of reasons. I could bore you with my theories, but I won't. Ben Hunt, but before that, Dean Young. Dean Young epitomised to me everything about the Dragons. I mean, born into the club via his dad, Craig Young, put everything into every game. He battled knee injuries. He had the knee injury in 2006 and then, struggled to train most times. And primarily, I put Dean Young up there with my favourite Dragons players. 2010, I finally got to see us win a grand final, mate. I never thought I would. I was at the semi-final, the major semi, or prelim, sorry, the Tigers. And I was right in front of, I don't know if you remember the game, but we were leading by a couple of points. Tigers had the ball with 60 seconds to go, and then Keith Galloway comes bustling around, and they couldn't pull him down, and they threw it out to Bo Ryan. And that was all happening right in front of me, in front of 70,000 people. The one guy coming across in cover fence with a buggered knee to stop Bo Ryan continuing on and potentially setting up a try was Dean Young. And we then went on to win the grand final. He managed to score a try. I'm actually getting chills up the back of the neck just telling it. He is my guy. Everything about Dean Young embraced to me what I love about the club. Look, it's unfortunate he's not at the club or had to move on from the club and got shifted up to Cowboys, but they're my main ones.
Well, by the time this podcast comes out, there's already a podcast out on Andy Raymond Unfiltered, Legend series with Dean Young, and it's a very interesting story. He's won in rugby league, so listeners check that one out as well. I think he's back at the Dragons now, isn't he, as an assistant coach? I could go down a rabbit hole. When he left the club, I sort of left a bad taste in my mouth. Okay. There was him and Paul McGregor, and a lot of Dragons fans out there would say that they are passionate. I would say that some of them are a different verb. And Mary, a lot of people, not people's cup of tea, but when they started bagging being Dean Young, a guy who'd been through the club and bled for the club and got us to a grand final and won because, they wanted him out because of nepotism or whatever. It was just sad, but it's good that, again, he is where he is now, and I've got nothing to say, nothing bad to say about the guy. Everything is praise, so I look forward to listening to that podcast myself. Thanks for the tip-off. Yeah, not a problem at all. Is the 2010 grand final one of the favourite Dragons games that you've been to as a fan?
Oh, yeah.
Or is there others that stand out?
Oh, the others stand out. That is my standout. Of course, they won. I was there. At halftime, we were behind, and I'm out the back. And the crowd was easy 70% Dragons. And the vibe was almost like that mortified, oh, not again.
Okay.
And then with about 20 minutes to go, Dean Young scored his try, and it was hold on, we can't lose this. That was the mentality at first. And then I saw the whole crowd just embracing themselves, people crying, it's like, we're actually going to do this. So, that is one of them. The other one, Troy, which stands out to me is actually 2018 against the Melbourne Storm. At Cogra, we were going into the game, I think it was about round 7 or 8, leading the comp. And this was billed as a big, the Dragons are actually going on fire, and Melbourne were at the top of their game as well, and we rolled them quite convincingly. And that was, I would say, the most clinical and best performance of a Dragons side I had seen, and that's even despite the Wayne Bennett years and all those good sides. And I thought at that time that Paul McGregor and the Dragons are back. Didn't pan out that way towards the back end of the year for various reasons, but as a favourite game on the hill, one of my favourites, and it is the game that notoriously, if that's the right word, was where Cameron Smith got a bit of he copped one to the Nadgers from the GOAT Jeremy Lattimore, and actually met Jeremy Lattimore over here a couple of years ago. He came over with Jason Nightingale, and he was telling that. And I said, "Oh, you're responsible for two of my favourite Dragons moments. 90, you scored 2 tries in the grand final of a premiership I never thought I'd see, and Jeremy, you got Cameron Smith and the Nadgers," and he laughed, and we had a bit of a joke about it, but got two really good guys, and they are my 2 favourite games.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. My actual first grand final that I went to live was the 99 grand final, Melbourne Storm and the Dragons. I'm sure you don't want to talk about that one.
I was there too. I was there. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, see, I already bought tickets earlier. I thought, obviously Parramatta were going to be there, but
of course.
And then I thought, it's a grand final, might as well go. So that was my first grand final that I went to. I remember that one. How
do you feel there? Sorry, mate, because I had the same experience in 2005 in that we were expected to beat the Tigers and make the grand final then, and I was at the grand final next week, and I was feeling still miserable, kicking the stones, bottom lip. I was right in front of where Benji Marshall did his pass, but it was just this weird kind of, I'm at the grand final, but it could have been better. I don't know. What was your experience of 99?
Yeah, I think it was probably much the same. I think, obviously disappointed that Parramatta weren't there, and I guess, though, on the flip side, excited that it was just the grand final and the first one that I'd been to, and I couldn't be disappointed who lost because Parramatta weren't there. So I think that was more the case, I think, for me. Obviously, major disappointment that Parramatta weren't there, but just a good day out with mates and enjoy my first grand final live.
Yeah, I'd take the same. It was 110,000 people. We'd had, the Olympic Stadium, and that was the first grand final there. I know they had the doubleheader earlier in the year, and I wasn't at that, but it felt to me as though rugby league had really gone, huge with a stadium that size. Of course, it's because of the Olympics. Side note, I was working for a construction company at the time, and we did a lot of the asphalt works around the Olympic Stadium, and I did the running track of the Olympic Stadium. So I'm there.
Wow.
I've worked on this stadium for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm at the grand final. The Dragons are up at halftime. Nathan Blacklock did that amazing try, heading straight towards where I was. And then what happened. And, But it was it was an exciting time from that perspective. I do actually remember it fondly, apart from, of course, the result.
Well, you could have just thought about the running track all day.
Oh, no. Yeah. If Kathy Truman had tripped over, it would have been my fault.
Oh, geez, you wouldn't have told anyone that you were working on it then, for sure.
No.
Now, going back in time there into the early 1990s, Brian Smith was a coach of the Dragons. Now, I'm a big Brian Smith fan, and I love hearing Brian Smith's stories. As a fan, what are your thoughts and story, or if you have a story about Brian Smith from a fan's perspective?
Yeah, sure. I love what Brian Smith did for the club. We're talking 90. I can't remember the year he came, but we got to the grand final in 92 and 93. 85 was, well, I know it was only 7 years before, which seems like a short time, but it seemed like a long time ago that we'd had success, and we were punching above our weight. You had the Brisbane Broncos, at their peak. You had the Canberra Raiders, Penrith, Manly were always there or thereabouts. And here's this side that didn't have superstars in it, but he seemed like the coach who could pull together a team to go above and beyond. I nothing but revere that fella. Again, there's an element of Dragons fans who are like, oh, Brian Smith and the smells like Newtown thing, which ultimately probably proved true, that kind of synopsis. But for me as a fan, I got nothing but admiration for Brian Smith. And he went on to, he made clubs better. Mm-hmm. And I know it's the one thing that most people remember is, well, he never won a grand final. Well, there's lots of people who never did that. But he made clubs better. In terms of stories, I don't have any. I actually played Oztag with his brother, or his half-brother, I think it was. So I sort of knew him through that. Brian Smith's brother, funny enough, Tony Smith, if you remember, who went to coach in the English, he was actually an Adelaide Rams junior coach. Okay. He was the support coach to Rod Reddy.
Okay.
Sorry, David Waite was a junior coach who ended up going to the Dragons and had coached at other clubs. But Tony had basically supported Rod Reddy, which I'm sure we'll get in the Adelaide Rams at some point soon. But Brian Smith himself, just a brains of the game, up there with like a Warren Ryan or those kind of scientists, if you will. Yeah, increasing the sport. But just sadly for him and the teams that he coached, that just couldn't crack the big one, and it's a shame that people remember him for that.
Yeah, it is a shame. I totally agree with you. It certainly turned Parramatta around from where they were in that early 90s, mid-90s period to the late 90s and into the 2000s, so certainly turned them around there. Now, one question I want to ask from a fan's perspective is about jerseys, and like yourself, you're a jersey collector. I'm a jersey collector as well of Parramatta jerseys, and look, every 2 to 3 years a new home and away jersey can come out, but one thing I can think of for the Dragons is they've pretty much had the same home jersey for forever, the red V, and I guess it sort of creates a bit of a brand identity. What's your thoughts about like a brand identity jersey, and do you think that's a good idea for clubs to do, just to have like that simple one brand identity jersey?
100% yes. And that's across the board. I'm a lover of league, as we've discussed, and a lover of jerseys. And peak jerseys for me were those late 80s, early 90s kits. I mean, if you had to think of one kit for every club that is you would call their brand or identity, apart from the clubs who've come in later, of course, they'd be from that period of time. Parramatta with the blue and the gold. Even though they had the different jerseys in the early 80s, the blue and the into gold, with the stripes in the middle. Canberra Raiders, the milk or the Video Easy jerseys. South Sydney, again, they're another team that have maintained theirs, along with the Roosters, I suppose you could say. I've found that, if I'm a critique of jerseys, clubs like the Tigers, I think, have lost their way. And they are a joint venture club. I do respect that and understand that. So they want to form their own identity, but they had all these lavish and weird, wonderful stripes and things, which soon have got lost. So coming back to having a core jersey, I think in the modern day where you have alternates, every club would benefit greatly from having that again brand jersey, like the Warriors have gone back to.
Yeah.
That is one of the best jerseys going around.
Yeah.
As a side note to jerseys, I think with the need for more sponsors, and back in the 90s, you had your major sponsor, you might have had a sleeve sponsor and maybe a short sponsor, and that was it.
Yeah. It
looked a lot cleaner, and they integrated well into the jersey. Now you've got different patches and colours and things, and it ruins a lot of the jerseys. I mean, I'm an advocate. Newcastle fan base deserve a good jersey, and they haven't had a great one for a long time with the NOB slapped all over it.
Massive,
so, it's just, I feel for them. That's just my view. Manly have gone back to theirs, and I think that Manly, I know there's the controversy around the Inclusion Day jersey that they had last year, but I think they're one of the clubs that do it really, really well, because they are integrating the sponsors, or the sponsors are allowing integration of their branding into the jersey, which as a whole creates a better brand for everyone, in my view. If NIB could relax that, the Knights would have a cracking jersey, but for whatever reason, that hasn't happened. I've gone off on one there, Troy, but
that's
I'm a jersey nerd. I mean,
I know.
I've got the Clipsal on today.
You go, Clipsal. That's fine. I just think that having a brand identity jersey like the Roosters, like the Dragons, is a perfect idea. And look, it'd save a lot of money for a lot of people, because they'd only have to buy one. I mean, obviously, collectors, if sponsors change and that, we'd still buy them. But there wouldn't be the need of buying them every year if the sponsors are staying the same and the look is staying the same, and people would save money because they're ridiculously overpriced and things like that as well. Now, just quickly, how do you think the Dragons will go in season 2024 under new coach Shane Flanagan?
Yeah, sure. I'm hopeful without being confident. We're 3 games in now. Good start against the Titans, and then a couple of blobs against the Dolphins. And I missed the whole game last week, the Cowboys game. Probably just as good. I looked at 18-4 on my phone. I was at a birthday thing. and I've come back and it's like it's 40. And I'm like, oh. Troy, coming back to the question, is I reckon we're still a finish of around 9th, 10th would be a good finish for the club, and that's sort of where I expect us to finish. There seems to be a constant internal rumbling at this club for whatever reason, and I know it's the craw in a lot of fans. In a lot of fans thinking. Coming back, how they're going to go? Yeah, if we finish 9th or 10th, I'd be fine. I think Flano is the right guy for a rebuild. He has done it before at Cronulla when they were on the floor, and then of course coached them to a premiership. But I don't want Dragons fans to throw their toys out of the kite like they have with previous coaching regimes, and there is a habit to do that within our fan base. I think it's going to be, again, the rebuild. We've been rebuilding for however long, but yeah, I think we're not going to see results, where we're back competitive in the top 8, until at least next year. 9th or 10th, I'd be happy with because it's improvement. But if we finish higher than that, beauty, happy days.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, I like Shane Flanagan as a coach, and if Brad Arthur was to move on, then I'd certainly. Well, now he's at the Dragons though, so that's a bit unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen him at Parramatta, but
take Wayne, mate. Take Wayne, Uncle Wayne, mate.
Well, maybe there was that.
You reckon it's a chance?
No, I don't think it is. To be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it is. I've heard that he does want to maybe come back into New South Wales and maybe, but he wants to coach. So I don't know.
Do you want me to tell you a side story?
Okay, yeah.
I met Wayne Bennett a couple of years ago. So my best mate, he's now an MP actually over in New South Wales, but he was on the Australia Day Council, and they did a breakfast. They do it once a month, and this time it was in Sydney. He goes, mate, Wayne Bennett's guest speaker. Do you want to come along? I said, yeah, sure. And there was like 500 people at the museum down there in the harbour. And we got ushered in last. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in this huge room directly opposite Wayne Bennett. And I'm like, oh, and this is around 2014. He just re-signed to go back to the Broncos, and there was talk of him going potentially to the Dragons. Anyway, he got up and did his talk, and I got a sense of Wayne Bennett of why players revere him. Like it was seriously like those images you might see back in the 30s or 40s where grandpa's telling a story and all the kids are just like with their mouths open going. The whole room was like, he commanded it. And he leadership, and he covered a lot of different things. Anyway, he sits back down, and then we were chatting loosely amongst the table, but I just asked him, so what was the rationale going back to the Broncos? And he did want to go back home. He did want to go back to Queensland, but he did talk about that going to the Dragons was because he knew that there was unrealised potential there, and all they needed was someone who could get their heads right. My job was just to get their heads right and get them across the line, and that's what he did for us in 2010. He lifted Newcastle to what was their best finish in a long time back in whenever he coached them. He got them to a prelim final. He's another guy who makes teams better. And while the Queensland thing, he wants to stay up there, he does want to coach. I think Parramatta would be a prime target. If I was a betting man and he was going to go somewhere else, I'd say your mob. I would say your mob, because here's a club that's got potential. It's been on the brink for a long period of time. Wayne Bennett is the kind of guy who I just need to tinker a few things. I don't need to reinvent it. Don't need to kick loads of people out. I just need to tweak a few things and we can get them across the line. So if Brad Arthur couldn't do it for you and they were looking for a new coach, he is your guy, and I reckon he would be interested.
Do you think...
Sorry to build up your hope.
That
would be my thinking.
That's pretty good thinking. Do you think maybe then if Wayne was coach, Brad could be an assistant coach? Or Brad would just go straight away from the club?
Oh, that's tough.
Because there was talk that Wayne was going to come down as a general manager of football, but he wants to coach.
Yeah. I mean, Brad Arthur has been a good coach. And again, he's had Parramatta at this high level for a long period of time, and that's not easy in the modern game with salary cap and players leaving and coming and going and all that. So he is very, very good. And so I think that Brad Arthur, if I was a hazard to guess, if Wayne Bennett came in the club, there'd be clubs who would be very interested in having Brad Arthur as head coach, and that I'm sure is what he would want to do. And so I think you'd find that Brad Arthur would move on and could be a successful coach at another club.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. Now, let's get into the fun stuff. You moved to Adelaide in 2019 and got into the history of rugby league there, and particularly the Adelaide Rams, obviously. Now, for the listeners that might not know, who the Adelaide Rams were in rugby league.
Who they were, right?
Or
well,
who they are now, even.
Who they are now. Oh, yeah, sure. I suppose who they were, excuse me, is Adelaide Rams were born out of a war. They're a war child. And I think that relates to who they are now, in the sense that when we're talking about expansion and, where we're going to put a team, is it New Zealand, is it New Guinea, is it Perth? Adelaide Rams doesn't get a mention because in many people's minds, they're largely forgotten because they were part of that Super League war when loads of other things took the headlines. Yep. Okay, so that sort of covers, I suppose, both bookends of that question. When I see expansion talk, again, it's a big topic now, and rightly so, considering we've got an odd number of teams and we need to even it up and get 9 games around, is that the majority of people default to Perth. And I believe they default to Perth because when Perth came into the comp in 95 and there was 4 new teams in there, that was actually a genuinely exciting time for the sport. It was finally going to the breadths of Australia and New Zealand as it happened. And I remember that time as a kid, being a Dragons fan, well before the Rams were even thought of, thinking, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
How good is this? And so I remember the Perth, or Western Reds, sorry, as they were back then, when they came into the comp, it was a really, really exciting time. But Adelaide, again, come out of Super League. They did have 2 competitions, 2 seasons, one in Super League and then in the new NRL in 98. And then sort of cast aside when all sort of things come back together again and they were thought of as, well, Adelaide, we tried and failed. There's a far bigger and more complex story behind that. And again, I can tell you as much or as little as you like on this, but they were never given an opportunity. They never had the real opportunity to succeed. They did have some successes in various forms, but going back to when they were brought into the comp in 96 originally, and then Justice Burchett knocked that on the head. Super League can't happen. Then in 97, it was all go again. They had 6 weeks to pull together a side amongst 22 teams across 2 competitions of the players that they could get.
Okay.
And you're like, right, well, how is that the formula for success of a club, especially in a new state, But the crowds embraced them. Adelaide, in that 97 season, Troy, of the 2 competitions, the Super League and the ARL, 22 teams, Adelaide Rams had the 5th highest crowd average across the board. And they won 2 games at home, won their first game at home and their very last game at home. The ones in between, they, for the most part, got flogged. So there was crowd interest there. There had been long interest and a history of rugby league before the Rams came in as well.
Okay.
Again, if you want to know about it. But to the locals, they were like, well, Adelaide's got a team. Brilliant, let's go support them. And Adelaide is a city that's small enough to be a community, but to be big enough to be a city, and they get behind all their sporting teams, be it the Crows, the Power, the Thunderbirds, the baseball. So the Adelaide Giants have won back-to-back Australian Baseball League titles. They are well known over here and well supported. Fans will go, but well supported in the community widely because it's got Adelaide behind it. And you get that in Perth as well. You'll get that in Hobart, which is why they get jack jumpers and bits. But you sort of don't get that in Sydney. Okay. Sydney gets lost in a lot of different things. So Adelaide's position before was born out of a war. The fans got behind them, even though they weren't successful on the field. They went in the greater rugby league circumstances or the greater rugby league view. I see them, Adelaide are largely forgotten about, tried and failed, and there's far more to it than that. But in the local community and amongst Jersey fans like me and you and the rugby league, I suppose train spotters, they're actually quite fondly remembered in
definitely.
memoriam, and that's how I became a fan. I became a fan when I moved here. Is like, I didn't know much about the Rams apart from Tony Iro running backwards, and Kevin Walters' chicken dance, and Chubby Checker in the full kit. An Adelaide Rams the first club to get an entertainer to wear the full kit.
Yeah, wow.
While doing a performance,
not just the jersey.
Not just the jersey, he had the shorts, he had the socks, and credit to him because he's built a certain way, Chubby. Didn't care, he sung his songs.
That's it.
But coming back to the Rams themselves, they're fondly remembered in a quirky way. But there's far more to Adelaide and their history in rugby league that a lot of people would know. I got into it because I'd moved over here, no rugby league, of course.
Okay.
I'd had 6 months off from work, and it became a pet project of mine. So I wonder about the Rams. Wouldn't mind it. And I went down rabbit holes, and I got to meet people. I've since got to know the people who work in rugby league over here, a lot of people who run the clubs. I've got to know a lot of ex-players. I know a few politicians over here as well, and it sort of painted a picture for me, a very different picture than what I would have thought had I stayed in Sydney, in that there was a strong following in the league here. There still is, to a various degree, even though the Rams have been gone for 25 years. It's amazing. I see loads of people getting around in NRL gear. Primarily, Troy, the three clubs that I see the most are the Brisbane Broncos, South Sydney Rabbitohs, and your Parramatta Eels.
Okay,
Interesting, and there is a local team in here, the Eastern Eels.
Okay.
The Eastern Eels compete in the NRLSA competition, have done for many years. Their emblem is that, do you remember the logos? They weren't the official logos back in the 80s, but they were sort of like those logos that burst through the banner.
Yes, yeah.
So the Eastern Eels have that as their logo.
Oh, how cool.
That the eel bursting through, yeah. So a lot of the fans from over here in league come from, expats like me, people who had teams or followed the Rams when they were here, but also people who played in the local leagues and whose relatives played in the local leagues, and they become fans of the team that is the NRL equivalent, like the Eels or like the Bulldogs.
Okay.
They've got a Bulldogs team over here. So I know I've sort of gone off on one there, mate, but just to paint a bit of a picture. It's not, Adelaide is not a place where there was rugby league for 2 years and that's it. There was a great history before that. The Super League War, when Adelaide left town, left a huge dearth in rugby league here. And they're gradually picking up over the last 5 or 6 years. With a small team over here in the NRL, they've been able to build up a good, strong, solid platform to grow their league. The women's game has come along in the last 3 years. They've recently competed. The South Australian girls have competed in the NRL Women's National Championship, so they've been going there for the last 3 years. And these are girls who have grown up playing other sports. They're going to represent the state. So I have gone off on one, Troy, haven't I?
That's fine, mate. It's just very interesting.
To give you a bit of a flavour, because, again, before I moved here, I wouldn't have thought of that, but it became a real passion project of mine through COVID as well, and it's grown into this ridiculous Adelaide Rams collection that I've got, and I love the club in hindsight. I've had interactions with a lot of the old players as well on the pages, but yeah, there you go.
That's fine. That's very interesting indeed, and what do you think? Do you think that Adelaide and the Rams are just going about their business quietly and then waiting for a right time to apply to the NRL? Because, as you mentioned before, nobody's talking about an NRL team in Adelaide again. So, do you think they're maybe just doing it quietly and then waiting for that right moment to get it right?
I'd say no, and the reason I say this is that the NRL themselves, so you got NRL WA, you got NRL Vic, you got NRL. Okay, so there's people who work in rugby league and have developed the game in those various states, which is a fantastic thing. It is the National Rugby League, let's not forget.
That's right.
National means part of a nation, and it's really 3 East Coast states and primarily 2. So, but those people aren't, within the NRL, can't or are limited to advocate growth or expansion in those states. That's why you don't hear the head of NRLWA talking about, well, we want Perth back. It comes from a business ideal or a consortium, right?
Yeah.
Now, over here in Adelaide, politicians have, when Origin was here, 2020 and 2023, have said, oh, yeah, we want more. We love rugby league here, but then they go and focus on other things because there's all sorts of things going on. It's a big AFL state here, as you would know.
Massive.
But so there's no, I suppose, formal bid team from Adelaide who are, okay, we're working behind the scenes and we want to bring the Rams back, or we want to bring an Adelaide team in. Same in Perth. It's usually Mark Geyer will be interviewed and he'd say, yep, we want it back because he's part of the Rams back then. He's in media now. You'll get, business folk over there talking about, yep, we've got the money and that. So there's no formal bid team here.
Okay.
Like there is, I think David Moffat's just launched one in New Zealand. The Port Moresby one, well, that's Albo's Pacific piece. Let's stop that. Let's hope the Chinese. Yeah. We'll give you a team. I've got my views on that, Troy.
Well, I'm probably the same. I've heard what's going on there and don't necessarily agree with it.
No, I don't myself. Again, it's the National Rugby League. I think I love Papua New Guinea from a league, their fandom, the Kumals, but that's for an international level. I think if they can heavily investment into rugby league in Papua New Guinea, 100% behind it. Let's develop those players so that they can rise to a level of potentially New Zealand or a Samoa or an Australia, over a period of time, because they've definitely got the population to be able to do it. And that grows International Rugby League, which is a form of the sport that's been criminally underused over the last 20 years, in my mind. It's come to the fore now with the development of Samoa and Tonga, but most of those players were born in Australia of their heritage, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing that they're representing their country, but it's been growing here. Papua New Guinea is a place where, maybe like New Zealand, you have the ability for them to grow their own players respectfully, if that's a terminology you could use. So I think from an international perspective, it would be fantastic. And a lot of those players could come into the NRL in various teams. But to have a team that's funded by government money, and what happens if the government gets kicked out, which happens in elections, things change. They're an international side that I think they've been mooted to be playing in Cairns.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, you've got a side that isn't playing out of their country a lot of their time, that's funded by the government. It's like Frankenstein's monster. It's sort of put together all these bits and hopefully it'll come alive.
Turn out, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think that's the right way forward. I think you're better off investing in, and it would be investment in places like South Australia and Perth and WA to grow those competitions, or grow the competitions here, and bring those teams into the competition. One thing out of COVID we learnt was, New Zealand Warriors, or the Warriors, were over here under hotels for 2 years because we had to lock borders down. If you have another international side, and let's say COVID-2 comes along,
you're going to have to do
and
the
let's
same thing.
not think it's not going to happen, you get the same thing with two teams. So there's complexities there. I'm not against growing. I'm all for growing the sport in different forms, but I'm an advocate for growing the game here in South Australia, and there is a definite opportunity to that with the right investment.
I agree. I think if the NRL is going to bring in new teams, I think Perth, Adelaide, and probably maybe a central Queensland side as well. Spread it around in Queensland. That would be the way to go, because as you mentioned before, it is the National Rugby League, and the AFL is played in every state. So, National Rugby League. So get it around the country.
Get it around. Yeah, I don't know if I've got an image on. I don't know if I can share screen or whatever for your viewers, for your listeners. I'm sure probably won't see it if I could do it. But it just, you got population bases to consider and distance to the existing NRL teams. If you want me to, I can try and share it on screen for you if you like. I don't know if that's something I can do, or I might be able to do it here.
Maybe if you can.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes. There we
So
go.
what I've done is, for the viewers, I'll explain it for listeners, is if you plot the dots where the existing NRL teams are in the competition right now. So if you're seeing this, it's the green dots.
Yep.
And then you plot the dots for what I call true expansion. Now, I don't consider Queensland as expansion. I would consider Queensland as consolidation, because it's putting more teams in an area that rugby league is a heartland sport, let's call it that. So if you plot the dots and then you plot the populations of what are the potential expansion sites. So Port Moresby, firstly, the city itself, aside from the country, is less than 500,000 people. So these are the ones that you consider could get to games and etc.
Yep.
Well up there, but they could be based in Cairns, where I've got the Pacifica side there. And Cairns is a city, by population in the metro area of Cairns is 160,000. So that's quite a small population.
Yep.
If you go to New Zealand, Wellington and Christchurch, roughly the same size, both less than 500,000 each. You've got more rural areas, of course. Adelaide, if we look at, jump over to Perth. Perth, 2.1 million people. A lot of people look at Perth and think, yep, we should go to Perth. Look at the geography, and that is hard to overcome. Perth does have its benefits, but it is a big population base, but it is all the way over there, more than twice the distance from most NRL teams than Adelaide. And then you look at Adelaide on the plot, a city of 1.4 million people. And look how close it is to those dots, Troy.
Yeah,
and if you're looking, if you're listening, you can go through the exercise yourself. If you spare a couple of hours, you've got nothing to do. Put a dot where Adelaide is compared with the NRL teams are. It's very close. It's a 2-hour flight from Sydney in a population base which has big business behind it. We've got this big submarine project coming in now, the big nuclear subs, if you've heard. So lots of businesses are heavily investing in Adelaide and South Australia because of that. It does have a history of rugby league well before the Adelaide Rams and a followings for some degree now, considering there's been no team here for 25 years or 20 or so years. It's prime.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't talk about it because I just believe that people write off Adelaide as, well, one, a nothing city. In their own minds, they look down at Adelaide for whatever reason. But because they saw that the Adelaide Rams were briefly in the comp, they don't know much about them, they don't know the history, and it's tried and failed. They're their AFL state, and that's all they are. I think Adelaide Rams should be definitely more in the conversation. Of course, that's why I'm in my gear, and
that's right.
And that's right. I might be biased, but it's not just because I'll bring back the Rams and come on.
Yeah,
There's a bit behind it.
There's reasons behind it. Yeah. Well, speaking of gear, what's your favourite piece of Adelaide Rams merchandise that you've got? I mean, you are a jersey collector, but is there a jersey that stands out for you, and is there any other piece of merchandise that stands out for you, Adelaide Rams wise? Yeah,
okay. Well, my favourite piece is the one I've got on now, the one I'm wearing, by Nike. When Nike was sponsoring jerseys, when Nike were a big global brand. I mean,
absolutely.
Look back then. So this is a match worn that I acquired recently from the NRL season. So the NRL with the Clipsal badge on it, number 17 on the back. I got that through a friend of mine who knew I was at the Adelaide Rampage on Instagram, and we've been in touch, and I acquired it through him. That is my favourite piece because our Rams match worns are very, very rare.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that while I like, I suppose at the time I didn't like the Super League jerseys. I thought they were a bit. Well, I was an ARL boy. I was a Dragons boy, right?
Okay,
but I've come to like them now. I like the Super League '97, but the '98 ones with the Clipsal and the NRL badge, they're my favourites. I think my most favourite jersey of the Rams, though, is the one that they wore in their final two games, but the one on YouTube that people might see against Newcastle, dubbed the Golden Fleece, which is the yellow with the Clipsal on it. One of my mates, Gaz's vintage, Luke, he's got one, a match worn. Yeah. And there is another Adelaide Rams fan here who I know Anton really well. Actually saw him and his crew at the Origin. We're all wearing our Rams kits. He's got a Golden Fleece as well. And it's a very, very basic jersey, but I just love it for some nostalgic reason. So that would be my two.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it must be hard to get Adelaide Rams merchandise around these days.
It is, yeah. So when I started again my exploratory, what's happening with the Rams, all that, I acquired my first jersey. It took a while, and they're not cheap. And then it grew from there. And again, your viewers might see, but the listeners won't. The thing over behind me is I had the setup done for when State of Origin was over here in 2023, and I've acquired all this merch, flags and banners, and you can see them because I had Channel 9 around my house. So they come to interview me. Yeah. Mike Dalton, the roving reporter, top guy. I tell you, worked his absolute backside off over here during Origin. And he came up, interviewed me, we're in the house, and he wanted to know about the Rams. It went on Channel 9 on the East Coast, apparently, because I was getting texts from my friends going, what are you, the Rams fan? But yeah, it's grown, and I love it. So I'm a fan in retrospect. The older I've got, Troy, I've become less that ardent, mouthy Dragons fan, but a lover of rugby league as a whole. Yeah. And so the lover of the history. So Rams, of course, but other clubs too. And just watching the sport as a neutral now. I mean, watching the Eels play the other day against the Sea Eagles, Combank Stadium. I just love that. I can sit back and love a game that doesn't involve my team. Yeah. Well, I haven't loved many Dragons games over the last 5 years, let's be honest. But yeah, I'm a lover of the sport, I suppose, primarily now that I'm getting a bit older and a bit less angry.
Oh, well, it definitely shows in your voice and your comments that you're a very passionate fan. What would you do if the Rams do come back in the competition? Which team would you support, the Dragons or the Rams?
Oh, mate, it's a tough one. I suppose it's been like emigrating from a country to Australia, and then who do you follow? Look, I would become a Rams fan, absolutely no doubt. It wouldn't mean that I'd stop following the Dragons. Yeah. But to me, I've become so invested in the Rams, again, in memoriam, 25 years after they're gone. That shows how bad I'm going. A Dragons fan, I'm actually more supporting a side that hasn't been around for that long. That's how bad they're gone. The Dragons, for me, just my humble opinion, we lost something with the JV, and some clubs... I mean, Steelers lost a hell of a lot more than we did. Their identity and Tigers and Magpies fans and that. There was just something that sort of hasn't been the same for me. I still follow them. Don't get me wrong. They are my team, but it's just a club that sort of it's trying to be one thing and the other. Adelaide Rams would be my team, I think. But the Dragons always dear to my heart. Always will be. But I'd want to see Adelaide Rams succeed, or if it was an Adelaide another team succeed. And again, I go back to the question or the comments before, is it because I'm a lover of the sport? Yeah. And I want to see the sport grow and thrive where I know it can in other areas with the right investment. I mean, I'm no Melbourne Storm fan. I was there in '99 grand final when we got beat. I saw the salary cap stuff. But I love seeing the Melbourne Storm succeed because of what they're doing for the sport nationally. They have now established, I know they're not everyone's flavour, especially Eels fans, sorry to bring that up, considering thanks, 2009. Mate. No, I didn't mean, I realised what I was saying and who I was talking to halfway through my piece there. But they've actually established now a strong foothold and a respected foothold in the most AFL-minded and rabid city in the country. Absolutely. They've been able to do that. So I love seeing the sport that I love grow, So, again, that's the long way of me answering that question, I know.
Melbourne's got how many AFL teams?
Oh, geez. I'd be double figures. Maybe nine or 10.
Yeah, maybe. Well, Adelaide's only got 2, South Australia's got 2. Maybe the Rams could do the same thing. It'd be easier to overtake 2 AFL teams, do you think?
Oh, Troy, you're talking my language now. I was on another podcast, the Rugby League Digest podcast. So Michael Adams, who I got to know well, and Andy. Well, that was just Michael interviewing me. And this came up because he said, your case for the Rams. And I said, one of the things is that Melbourne's been able to establish a strong foothold and membership and following in a city with 9 or 10 AFL teams when there's no real vacant space on a weekend because
That's
there's
right.
always an AFL game which hogs the headlines, right?
Absolutely.
In Adelaide, you've got two. Like Perth, you've got two that will take up a Friday or a Saturday. There is clear airtime for a standalone rugby league team that would get the backing of locals. I know absolutely 100% confident behind that. And so it would get local exposure where you're not having to compete with the big beast that is AFL, and gets a lot of attention here, and rightly so. So that is another benefit for an Adelaide team or a Perth team, is that it would get the support without clashing with the big dog sport here.
That's right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Parramatta's legend Nathan Highmarsh has actually got a connection with the Adelaide Rams. He made his debut back in 1998. His first of his 330 games. So it's played in parks for some reason. I don't know what that was about. Whether that was to do with a promotion of potentially a movie, I guess, maybe the Dish. I don't know when that came out, but Parramatta and Adelaide in parks. It was in round 10, 1998, so I'm not too sure why that was, but
I should know this, mate. Off the top of my head, I don't.
Oh, well.
In my research, what I do know is Parramatta won it. It was Nathan Highmarsh's debut game. It was also Rod Reddy's last game as coach of the Rams.
Okay.
So at that point, Troy, from a Rams perspective, sorry to hijack it from the Eels.
It's all good, mate.
From a Rams perspective, they'd won one game out of their first 10 in the 1998 season. So they were at the bottom of the table. And Rod Reddy was let go, and then Dean Lance took over, and they immediately won their next game. And
that
they
always
went on
happens, but when coaches leave.
Yeah. And then they went on to win a number of games after that. They had, I think, 3-game winning streak in a row. And the Adelaide Rams 1998 NRL team, right, they finished, I think it was 17th in the competition. But in doing my research, as I do and have done, is I came across a Rugby League Week article in 2012. So this is 14 years of the NRL at that time. And they had all these different stats that we know common today, but back pre-NRL, you didn't really things like line breaks and bits. The 1998 Adelaide Rams team had the highest average line break per game of any team in NRL history. So the 14 years of NRL, 1998 Adelaide Rams had it. It was 6.4 a game. So when Dean Lance took over, and the Rams were just, Graham Appo had been in the side for a bit, and he went on a mad run. They were scoring loads of points and scoring tries. It's just found it hard to win games at times. But that was the turning point. So the Eels game and Heidi's debut game, and what a legend! Coming back to Eels, what a legend for that club and for the sport. Nathan Highmarsh is and has been. With Nathan Highmarsh, sorry to ask you the question. What are your thoughts on people talk about legacy these days, right? I'm a bit iffy about it, but that guy put everything, like a Ray Price, but in a different kind of his own way, put everything into that club for 300 plus games, and now he's seen as the bit of the joke of the duffer, and he plays the bit of tomfoolery on the Matty Johns house, and that's what people know him for primarily now. Do you think that has somehow affected how people viewed him as a player?
Nah, I don't think so. I think I think fans know what he was like as a player. I think it's only because, as you mentioned, he is on the Matty John show now, so that's probably where most of the new sort of rugby league fans and younger rugby league fans would know him of. But definitely those ones who watched his career and have followed rugby league during that time, they'll never forget, and I don't think that would be ever lost, I don't think.
No, good to hear, mate. No, don't think. I just want to ask an Eels fan.
That's okay.
Except no bigger Eels fan than you, just because I was always interested.
Champion player. Unfortunately, never got to win a grand final, but some of the greats don't get to win one anyway. No. Who's some of your favourite Adelaide Rams players from the 2 seasons that they had? Yeah,
sure. So I have got my hand on footage as well. So it's not. I mean, Kerrod Walters would be primarily one. He was the marquee signing.
Yeah, that's right.
So the Broncos had, they were spewing with talent, and he came over here. You had guys, and then there was the lesser likes. So Kevin Campion was a massive influence on the Dragons' 1996 season, which actually is my favourite season of all Dragon seasons. Yeah. That side started off with half a club because the Super League war had broken out. He had signed to come to Adelaide. Then he was at the Gold Coast, had signed to come to Adelaide. That all got called off. And then he ended up going into the 96 side that made the grand final, lost to Manly. But he's one of my favourite Rams players. There's guys like Mark Corvo, who had come from Canberra Raiders and really had was a fringe first grade player, and again an amazing Canberra side, and then stood out amongst the players. He won Player of the Year in 1997. And then there's guys like Chris Quinn, Adam Peake, who I know has been on your podcast. These guys. So Adam Peake was actually brought over to go into the Rams under-19 side in 1997. And captained that side and made his first grade debut later in that year. Side note, of the 22 teams in the rugby league competitions, ARL Super League, Adelaide Rams didn't have a reserve grade side.
Okay.
Did not have one. They were the only team. So the guys when guys got injured in the top grade or they needed new players, they brought the under-19s like David Kidwell, who also played for the Eels. So Adam Peake. Luke Williamson he's a 19-year-old. He came and debuted. Graham Appo is one of these sort of legends in memoriam. They're not dead. I'm sorry, I keep using that. No, I know they're not dead, but I look at their careers in hindsight and reflect on it. So he scored like 114 points in 16 games, Graham Appo, in the back half of 98, and then went to the Roosters once the Rams folded and sort of didn't play much beyond that. So there's lots of players who I admire from the Rams. Many of them only played for the Rams, like Dion Bird. A guy like Dion Bird, who most rugby league fans won't know. Had a cracking season in 1998 and then went to play over in the UK and Europe. Matt Daylight, Darian Doherty. I'm rolling off some names, here now. Tony Iro running backwards.
That's iconic, that moment.
And I've had engagement with guys like Chris Quinn and Kurt Wrigley and Kerrod Walters on Instagram page, because whenever I post up something, they're always advocating bring back the Rams. So they're favourites too. Lots of favourites. Sorry, Troy. It's like, what's your favourite child? Yeah, all of them.
That's it. Well, shout out to Marty McKenzie as well. Good friend of mine. We catch up.
Oh, is he now?
Well, we catch up at Parramatta games in Queensland because he's up in Queensland these days. So every now and again I'll catch up with him. So and message him as well. So shout out to Marty, who also played for the Rams as well.
He did indeed. He did. Inaugural season. One of those troubadours who came over, come over with the masses to plant the flag here. So please pass on a hello from a bloke he doesn't know.
Okay.
But no, there's a fan of his over here in Adelaide.
Okay.
So Marty, g'day.
Yeah, that's it. Well, speaking of trying to make answer a question and pick your favourite, it's time for the quick top 10. And you can elaborate on these if you want to, but it's just a simple answer. Barbecue or tomato sauce?
Tomato.
Okay. Little side question to that one, so it's going to be a quick 11, I guess.
Yeah, you're right.
Fridge or cupboard? Where do you store it?
Cupboard. Oh, there's no debating that.
Okay.
For me.
Good. I like that one. On a plane, window or aisle seat?
Aisle seat. And my missus always takes the window seat, which means that I generally get stuck in the middle seat when she books. And I'm 6'2", so I sacrifice. Darling, all right.
Okay.
I'll do this for you, darling. There you go.
Happy wife, happy life. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Arnold or Sylvester?
Arnold.
McDonald's or KFC?
KFC, and I haven't eaten McDonald's in over 25 years.
Okay. Wow.
There's a story, but this is a quick thing, I know. So,
Well,
yeah.
no, I'd like to hear that because
You want to?
Yeah, 25 years. That's a massive
Okay.
long time.
So I, during my uni days, had a job collecting trolleys at Westfield Miranda, driving those tractors around the car parks.
Okay.
And when I wasn't at uni, I'd be working there 7 days a week trying to earn money and buy cars and bits. And I used to go to the local food court for lunch because there wasn't much time for lunch. Always McDonald's.
Yep.
Always a McChicken. And I felt like there's that bloke who did the documentary. I felt like I was doing that after a time.
Yes, I remember.
Whatever his name was,
One hit
Morgan
wonder.
something. Yeah. And I was just like, I keep going back to McDonald's. Why am I doing this? I feel disgusting. It's because it's cheap and it's convenient and I'm going to get. I was like, right, that's it. I'm not going to eat McDonald's for a year. And I haven't gone back since. And I've been in situations where it's the only thing open. And I'm starving. I'd eat my fist. And I'm like, I can't break the streak.
Okay.
And I haven't. There you
Okay,
go.
well, that's an interesting streak then, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Morning or night person?
Night.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Seinfeld or Friends?
Seinfeld. Seinfeld.
Favourite Seinfeld character?
George.
Okay, yeah, nice. And we'll wrap things up with a set of 6. The personality questions. Look, this one's probably maybe difficult to answer, but just how passionate you are. Is there a favourite sport outside of rugby league?
Cricket, mate. I'm an absolute cricket nut. As much as I love rugby league and the Dragons and the Rams, I'm an absolute cricket nerd. Yeah.
Nice. Well, you got all year round sports loving, don't you? Cricket in summer, rugby league in winter. Awesome.
But there's that weird gap of like 3 months after the grand final and cricket really hasn't started where you're sort of like, oh, what am I doing with my life? I better go have a conversation with the missus.
Nice. Favourite holiday destination?
Oh, I went to Sri Lanka on a cricket tour with my team a couple of years ago. Sri Lanka, if you got the means, get over there. It's the less chaotic version of India, which I loved as well, and I've played over there too. Sri Lanka, gorgeous. Yeah, highly underrated.
Nice. Who would be the most famous person you would love to meet or would have loved to have met?
Ah, right, okay. Would love to or would have loved to have? Curious one, Benelong. Now, do you know who Benelong is?
No.
So Benelong was an Aboriginal going back to the 1700s or 1800s that early settlers actually befriended, and he taught them the ways of the indigenous peoples.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so I'm going a bit of a path here, and I'd love to know from his perspective how viewed. I mean, like for them before white blokes turned up. It must have been like aliens coming from the sky for us. It must be like, who are these people? So I would love to have met him and just understood, from an indigenous perspective, white folks settlement. Sadly died. He went to UK and got crook, and I think he died at a young age. So it's quite a
Benelong Point. Then it was named after.
Yeah, all named after him.
Okay.
Benelong. Yeah. So modern day though, and this might get a few people wrong. So I'd love to meet Donald Trump. I'd love to see the real side. I know it's very polarising, and people start going off on one.
A lot of people have mentioned him as a person they'd love to meet and have a chat with.
I find him fascinating. I find the whole thing fascinating. Not saying right or wrong, just fascinating what's going on with him and politics right down over there.
I like at the moment, the other day, he was ordered by court by a due date to hand over $400-something million, and it's like, oh, you got a due date of this to hand over that money. It's like, I know when the electricity bill comes and it's like a few $100s, and you got a due date then. Imagine trying to hand over $400 million.
Mate, yeah.
Okay, this one will be probably interesting, but which 3 former Rams players do you think you wouldn't want to be on a deserted island with?
Wow. I wouldn't want to be on a deserted island with.
Who do you think would really irritate you or something like that?
Oh, right. Jeez. I love them all. So, okay, who I wouldn't want to be there?
I mean, this is difficult because obviously you're not a former player, so you weren't in and around them all the time. So,
yeah, okay. Tony Oro, because he keep running away, running backwards. He'd nick all the food and run away. There's one. Number two you have to have someone with a big appetite. Who's a big Mark Corvo and Brett Galea? They're the big front rowers. They'd probably eat too much food, so I'd like to have a bit of the smaller guys to share the sparing. So that's my logic without being personal.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. What's your specialty dish in the kitchen or on the barbecue?
Oh, mate, roast pork.
Okay, nice.
Roast pork. Yeah, that would be mine.
With
all the trimmings.
Is that a Sunday specialty or?
It does happen, yeah. It does happen every now and then, and I can do it in the kitchen or on the big old Weber out the back. So out in the Ram Cave. So yeah,
Ram Cave, I like it. I've got the Para Cave, you got the Ram Cave. Nice. Do you own a Ram car?
No, I don't. Okay. Actually, no. Side note: the Ram logo that I got in my hat and the actual logo actually comes from the Dodge Ram.
Okay,
that's how it evolved. Yeah, originally from that.
Well, they could become a major. They could become a major sponsor.
It's made.
Absolutely.
There's no reason why it shouldn't happen. Is what you're saying?
Well, certainly, if they did, you'd want to be a player and get one of those cars as a sponsorship deal. Favorite musician or band to listen to?
Wow, favourite musician. I've got a wide variety of tastes, but Michael Jackson is for me, amazing entertainer. Sad, I never got to see him. Would love to have seen him, but he doesn't have a bad song. All songs, listen, it's just like, this one, that's so Michael Jackson's my guy.
Yeah, played at Parramatta Stadium in 1980. I'm going to no.
Oh, right.
I think.
Yeah.
No, I think it might have been in the 90s. I could be wrong.
Oh wow! Did you see him?
No.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I know the Queen. The Queen opened it, and I think it might have been on his Bad tour. I think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Queen opened it, and the Dragons played the first game and got flogged 36-6. I think it was. If that's right, the old new Parramatta Stadium.
That is correct. Yeah. Yes. Michael O'Connor scored a try in that game. I think Eric Groth couldn't catch him on that day, but gave an almighty effort to try and get him.
Yeah. It's a good. Side note. It's a good colour clash. The Dragons Eels, red and white and blue and gold. It's just for an aesthetics. And I'll go back to the 80s and 90s jersey. Just the aesthetics of the game. A bit of a nerddom thing in mine. It just even though we got flogged, I remember that game. Actually quite fondly. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve Sharp scored the first try. He's forever known for that one. I think I could be wrong, but I think Stan Gerd scored a try too. I think.
Oh, geez, how bad we going? Stan was in the clear.
I'm not too sure if he was in the clear, but I think he may have. I'm not too sure.
Okay, if Stan
it was either that game or there was a game during that year that he scored a try at Parramatta Stadium. So I think.
Stan Gerd on the burst, as they used to say in the day.
Yeah.
That's a commentary thing that should come back. On the burst, I think that's lost.
On the burst, yeah, that's a great one. I remember that one growing up. On the burst, yeah. We don't see that these days, I guess, because the players are so quick that they collide so quickly. So the one they probably do use at the moment is off the back fence a lot. So
eyes up footy. Which used to be ad-lib play. Yeah. Used to be footballers. Yeah.
That's it.
But anyway,
yeah. Well, Guy Wilson, thank you very much for joining me on the Paracave podcast today. A really interesting insight into the Adelaide Rams and your love of rugby league and the Dragons and rugby league in general. Very passionate about it, and we've spoken for over an hour here. I think we've. It was just so interesting, and I think we might have to get you back on later on in the year and just delve more into the Adelaide Rams. I think it's an interesting thing to talk about.
No, I hope so for you, and thank you for having me on, and I'm glad that you found it that insightful. More than happy to come back and chew a bit more with you at a later date, mate, and hopefully by that stage you've got Mitchell Moses back. If you can get through this period without him, with his broken foot, and he could be in the mix come semi-final time, mate. So, if you want me back, more than happy to come back, Troy. Really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Guy.
See you, mate.
Well, thank you very much for listening to Guy and his rugby league supporting story of the Dragons and the Adelaide Rams. And did you find it as interesting as I did? And here's a question for you guys, the listeners. Could the Adelaide Rams be one of the teams that come back into the NRL? And when the NRL is thinking of expansion into an 18th, 19th, possibly 20th team. So could the Adelaide Rams be coming back? I think I know who could be, or who should be, the number one ticket holder if they do. And obviously that is Guy Wilson. So look, thank you very much again, Guy, for coming on the Parrot Cave podcast. I really enjoyed the chat. And listeners, if you want to follow him on Instagram, just check out Adelaide Ram page. As I said, there's a lot of pictures of Adelaide Rams jerseys, memorabilia, and so he wants to make the NRL national again, which I think is pretty much true. It is called the National Rugby League, but it just seemed to be played down the eastern seaboard in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, and also in New Zealand as well. But I agree with Guy, we should make the NRL national again and bring in an Adelaide team, bring in a Perth team, and then we'll see where else we can get a team into the competition to get that to the number 20 teams in the competition. Look, if you are interested in purchasing some Parrot Cave podcast merchandise, the hats are still available, just $10 each. Just send me a message on the social media channels and we will sort something out for sure. Thank you very much to those who have bought the hats in the past. I really appreciate your support. It just helps the podcast grow and can bring you some more entertainment each week. Speaking of which, I really hope you are enjoying the more content that is coming through to you each and every week. The tipping podcast, these interview-based podcasts. What else have we got? The review podcast of the Parramatta Eels games, and also the game day preview podcasts that I do with celebrity fans and fans of the opposition to whoever is playing the Parramatta Eels. And tomorrow will be released a game day preview. So the Parramatta Eels are taking on the North Queensland Cowboys at CommBank Stadium on Saturday, the 13th of April at 5:30pm. And for a game day preview, I have got Sam Revel from Wobbling Jaw Sports. So you can find him on Instagram as well, and YouTube and Twitter as well, or X as it is now known. But he joins me. He is a massive North Queensland Cowboys fan, so we chew the fat about the game that is coming up. So that will be out tomorrow, so stay tuned for that one. Have a listen to that one before the game. See about it, whether his thoughts are right or my thoughts as well, maybe. And see how we go. But thank you, Sam, for joining me on that one, and listeners, give him a follow as well. And look, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Parrot Cave podcast. If you did like this one, please leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform that you listen to. That would be mostly appreciated. Enjoy your footy for the weekend. I hope if you're not a supporter of the Parramatta Eels like myself, I hope your team gets up, unless it is the North Queensland Cowboys, of course. Sorry, Sam. But enjoy your footy. I hope your team gets up, and I will catch you soon with another episode of the Parrot Cave podcast. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Parrot Cave podcast. See you next time.